Hey everybody, Patrick Manchester. Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Drawn Bad, the show where I try to teach you some cool stuff about real estate and I draw it poorly on this whiteboard. It's a terrible idea, but I think it's the funniest thing I've ever come up with, so let's do this. Today, what I want to talk about is pre-inspecting your house before you list it for sale. So one of the main reasons a deal will fall through is a buyer comes through and does an inspection and they find a bunch of crazy stuff that they think needs to be fixed and the seller doesn't want to fix it. So I can't tell you how many times a seller has told me, don't worry about inspection stuff, Patrick. The house is in great shape. I can't imagine they'll find anything. And then a buyer comes through and sends in a list of about 45 things that they want the seller to fix. And everybody just gets mad at that point. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of that scenario. We don't want deals to fall apart because of the inspection stuff. So we want to pre-inspect and fix some of these items before they become an issue. The other thing that we want to do is every seller ever wants to get two things. They want to get the most amount of money for the house and they want to sell the house as quickly as possible. That's everybody, right? So what we want to do is we want to put ourselves in a position to do those two things. By pre-inspecting and fixing major issues and maybe fixing some minor issues, we can show to buyers that we have a house that's in phenomenal shape and show that we take care of it. The other thing that we want to do is we want to not spend a whole lot during inspections. So in my experience, agents, and myself included, I do the same thing, when buyers do an inspection and they find things that are wrong, agents love to ask for licensed contractors to do the work. Okay? So, and that includes stupid stuff like repairing electrical outlets or changing light bulbs. Like, you don't need a licensed electrician to change a light bulb. We want to avoid spending licensed contractor money on stuff that we can do ourselves. So when we pre-inspect, we have the opportunity to fix some of these things by ourselves ahead of time so that down the road when a buyer looks at the house, they're not asking us to have licensed people do the work. I'm not saying do shoddy work, I'm just saying with some of these easier things, sometimes it's just elbow grease and a weekend fixing some things without hiring the most expensive guy in the Yellow Pages. So what I want to talk about today is what inspectors look for and some of the things that you can do to make the house just look a whole lot better before you even go to sell it, again, to give yourself leverage with a buyer. So let's start off by drawing our, at this point it's pretty trademark, our crappy house. So you've got your house, and then you got your roof here. Oh, God, so good. I'm never not amazed by how unartistic I am. That's just not a skill that I have. So the first thing a lot of inspectors will do is they'll jump up on the roof. And what they're looking at is they want to make sure these shingles, beautiful shingles, are all in good shape. They want to make sure there's no repairs needed to the shingles. Or, worst case scenario, you need a total roof replacement. They also want to look at, you've got these little vents up here, like from your bathroom and from your, if you've got an attic, they want to vent the attic, and sometimes they have a vent that does that. They want to make sure that the flashing around here, the metal flashing, it looks like a banana or something. They want to make sure the metal flashing is in good shape and tightly secured around the vents to make sure that water doesn't get in. Some houses, if you got a wood burning fireplace, you have a chimney and there's little bricks in there. Oh, those are bricks. Those are such good bricks. They want to make sure that the chimney's in good shape. If it is wood burning, you have a spark arrestor up top that will prevent sparks from getting out and starting a forest fire. So they want to make sure those things are in good shape. So that's what they'll be up there looking at. They also want to make sure that the roof is vented. Sometimes on roofs you have these overhangs, and on these overhangs you have little vents in here that allow hot air to escape and cool air to go in. If you don't have the proper ventilation, sometimes you'll even see on like the front of houses, they have those like octagons with the slats in them. That's ventilation. That's letting cool air come in and hot air go out. If you don't have that, you've got Mr. Sunshine here beaten down on your roof. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to shorten the lifespan of the roof. And the second thing it's going to do is it's going to make that roof and that attic and then the rest of your house get super hot. which isn't good. Nobody wants that. So you want to make sure it's properly vented as well, and that's what an inspector is going to be looking at. The next thing, I've got my little cheat sheet here because feel like some of these videos are getting way off topic, so I want to keep myself in order here. The next thing they're looking at is the plumbing. So they're going to go around, they're going to turn on all the faucets, all the showers, run the bath. They're going to be looking for leaks. They're going to be looking for water pressure. They don't want, we don't want water coming in with too much pressure. Sometimes that can kind of destroy your pipes and your appliances. And you don't want water coming in with too little pressure because then the shower is going to be miserable. So they're gonna do all that. They're gonna check all the faucets, all the showers, all the tubs. My inspector has a infrared. I don't even know what you call it. It's a little gizmo he runs around. He looks at all the walls with, and it's infrared. It's heat, and so what he's looking for is little pockets of cool behind the walls because that can indicate a water leak. So that's pretty cool to see, to follow him around. It's super futuristic, but that's something that a lot of inspectors have now at their disposal to look for leaks that you can't see. They're also going to, and this is 10 years ago, I don't think a lot of people did this. We weren't doing it when I was flipping houses until we ran into an issue. But a lot of buyers now are doing this, and it's pretty smart. You've got your, you've got your toilets, right? And those drain out to a sewer line that generally runs out. Oh, sewer lines aren't that big. You're gonna get confused. That's not a sewer line. This is called Real Estate Drawn Bad. So sewer lines generally run out to like a street or an alley. And that's the main sewer line where all the waste goes out. Nowadays, it's very common for buyers to, so a lot of times you have little clean outs in the yard here. It's two little pipes. This one goes back in towards the house and this one goes out away from the house. But you have clean outs, some houses, where you can stick a camera down the sewer line and check for breaks or leaks or bellies and dips, or just if the whole line is rotted out. Maybe it's I know they have this. They were doing them in the 70s. I can't remember the name of it, but it's essentially when it gets wet, it turns into like cardboard, and that whole line needs to be replaced. But that's what they're checking for. And the reason they're doing that is because if there is an issue, down here, say there's a break right there, you've got to dig up the yard, and that gets super expensive. Worst case scenario, the sewer line runs into the street here, where the city tap is. You get your sewer that runs down the street here. If there's an issue like right here at the tap, and you've got to dig up the street, that gets expensive. You're pulling permits, you're getting crews out there to block off the street. That's a lot of money. Sewer line repairs can run anywhere from $6,000 up to $20,000, depending on how much digging and how much effort they've got to put in. So that's why buyers are inspecting for that, because they don't want that cost on them. They want the seller to fix that ahead of time. And if you've got an issue, it sucks, but you got to get it fixed. I mean, that's part of the joys of home ownership. Hopefully you don't have any issues, but you want to know ahead of time so that doesn't blow your deal. So that's what they're checking for on the plumbing side of things. With the HVAC, they're also going to look at the heating, the ventilation, which we've talked about a little bit, and the cooling systems of the house. If you've got a forced air furnace, most inspectors will take a look at that, make sure it's firing up properly. They want to make sure it's clean. They want to make sure the filter's been changed. And that's pretty common in my neck of the woods for a buyer to ask for a clean and service of the furnace before closing. It's like $90. It's not a big deal. It's like, get it done. If you've got a boiler, they want to see that clean and serviced. If you've got electric baseboard heat, they want to know that that's working properly. So that's what inspectors are looking at on the heating system. The ventilation we kind of talked about. Ceiling fans. They want to make sure those work. Bathroom fans, the little vent fans. They want to make sure that if you've got a microwave that goes into like a cabinet, that vents properly. Otherwise, you just dump a bunch of microwave air in like an attic, and that's not ideal. And cooling, if you have an air conditioner, if you've got like central AC, or if you've got like a swamp cooler or a whole house fan, or those little window units, an inspector will go through and check and make sure that those are working properly as well. With the electrical system, my inspector, he's got a little outlet tester, and he'll plug it into literally every single outlet in the house to make sure the outlets work. He wants to make sure they're grounded nowadays. A lot of older houses just had the 2-prong outlets. Now you really want that 3rd prong, which is a grounded outlet. They'll check for GFCI protection, especially around water sources. They want to make sure that your outlets will trip properly, so you don't have your house catch on fire. So they're checking that kind of stuff. They'll also check the electric panel. Sometimes older houses, they have smaller panels that aren't ready for modern appliances, or hot tubs, or all the things that we throw in there. So they want to make sure that the ampage is adequate, and then they want to make sure that all the breakers are tripping properly, and they want to make sure that there's no scorching or any issues in the electric panel. The big one out here in my neck of the woods is Federal Pacific. If you've got a Federal Pacific electric panel, every inspector has been trained to flag that as an item that needs replacing. It doesn't, but it's going to come up regardless. Whether you want to spend the $1,200 to $1,500 to replace the panel is up to you. I always tell sellers, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that's something that you're going to want to know. Is this going to come up during an inspection? You might just want to go ahead and replace it. You might not. Just kind of depends. Sometimes, if an inspector really knows what he's doing, they'll jump in. If you've got like a crawl space, it's orange in this scenario. If you've got a crawl space, sometimes they'll jump in there and look for, cracks in the foundation, or they'll walk around the exterior and see if there's any cracks or any bowing, anything that would indicate structural issues. Those are another one that can get very spendy to fix. I would say it's worth it to know that ahead of time before you list a house. That could be a $30, $40, $50, $60,000 swing in value if you don't know about that ahead of time. God, depending on the house and the location, sometimes those cost like $100 grand, if you've got structural issues in the house. But again, you want to know that ahead of time so you can price the house properly and so you can head off any issues down the road during inspections. Sometimes too, depending on the inspector, they'll look at the That's a yard, if you can't tell. That's your grass. But if you live on a hill and your yard goes like this, when it's let's get crazy. Let's use all the colors. When it starts raining, yeah, it's about that looks like rain, doesn't it? These little U's, those are raindrops. But when they come down, that water is going to run this way towards the house. In this situation, if you've got a hill like this that leads towards the house, that's called negative drainage. And what happens is that water starts to pool here and it erodes the foundation. That's what leads to a lot of structural issues, is negative drainage. So depending on how good the inspector is that comes out to pre-inspect the house, he may say, hey, you might have to regrade this and put like some dirt, build up some dirt here and get positive drainage away from the house. So the idea is to get your yard sloping like this so that when water comes, it drains away from the house and away from the foundation. That is some next level inspecting. That is, it solves a lot of problems. This is a next level drawing. I'm very proud of that. If you fast forward it and jump to this point, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So make sure you watch the full video. And so that's what they're looking at when they're walking around the exterior. They're looking for positive drainage. They're looking at like walkways and driveways, if there's cracks or tripping hazards. They're just looking at everything. An inspection is going to look at, a thorough one, a good one, is going to look at all the major systems of the house and all the little components. Not to get too off topic here, but they'll also check out windows and make sure those open and close properly. They'll take a look at doors, make sure those open and close properly, make sure the hardware works. They'll check appliances, make sure the oven heats up, make sure the microwave works, make sure the fridge, the light comes on and it cools everything down. So they're very thorough. Most inspections will turn into a 35 to 40 page report telling you about every little detail about the house. And that's what you want. Again, our goal is to fix some of these little issues and fix some of the major issues so that when you go to list your house, you can command a premium for it because you can tell a buyer, look, I've fixed all these things, I've got receipts, and I take care of my house. It's also going to prevent a buyer from walking away during inspection. You know, you don't want to be off the market for a week or two while they do their inspections, have something major come up, and then the buyer bails and you have to start from scratch by putting it back on the market. That's what we want to try to avoid. And then we also want to try to avoid having a buyer demand that you have licensed professionals do every little menial task that you could probably do yourself. You know, in some situations you do want licensed professionals, but for changing light bulbs or, you know, fixing a little broken outlet in the house, you know, you can probably do that stuff yourself. So that is today's episode of Real Estate Drawn Bad. Hopefully you learned something here today. Hopefully you got some chuckles at these terrible drawings. Like, look at these U's. Like, that's rain in my head. Oh goodness. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on these things. I also post houses for sale and a lot of cool tips like this. So thanks so much for watching. Take care.